So what happens if you want to create a hair with Make Your Pony 0.4? The first step is you need to activate Use Custom Mane, use Custom Tail if you want. In this case, it's not needed. Then you need to create basic curves. In my case, I already made some. You need to name them something and make sure it ends with underscore curves with an S. If you don't do that, it's not the biggest issue. You'll see later why. Next step is make sure that you have a rig that has the same name but underscore rig. This part is actually really important and you'll see later why. First thing first, what is the point of rigging? For example, if I showed a rig and I move the head, you see that the curves don't follow, right? So you want those curves to follow the head. So to do that, you need that bone to follow the head, which it does not right now. So to do this, select your bone, go into pose mode, or in my case, control tab. It switched blue, that means you're in pose mode. Then you can close this. Make sure you go inside bone constraint. Add, now there's two things you can do, either a child of or an armature constraint. I will demonstrate both. Armature, you need to add a target bone, then select pony armature, and then RG head. And now that you have this, it will follow the head. The alternative would be to use you need to be in pose mode. Select a child of constraint and it works fairly similar. Select pony armature, then RG head, set inverse, and now when you select the rig, it follows. So both work the same. So once you have the rig following, usually when you start up, it's going to look a little bit like this, right? What you want to do is close this, open Fur settings, and then there's this little tab here called Fur Tools. Open it, and now make sure you have only your curve selected. Let's see what this says. Convert curve to custom hair. Custom hair is what the system I have developed for the Make Your Pony mains. It transforms those curves into a full-fledged hairstyle, right? But there's two types of hair you can create in that way. One is the mane, the other one is the tail. So here there's a selection menu. If you select tail, it's going to try to attach to the rear. If you have a mane, it's going to try to attach to the head. So be sure you select the correct one. And now make sure you have your curve selected. I won't repeat this enough. In object mode, please. And then convert to custom hair object. And now it did it. Now I want to demonstrate something before we go even further. Let me just clean that up real quick. If for whatever reason you forgot to name it curves, that's no big deal. Just select it and see it renamed it to curve. Also, don't do what I just did. Don't delete and redo it a bunch of times because every time it creates new nodes. So at the very least, when you retry it, clean up your scene, but try to not spam that button because every time you create a new copy of these nodes, then it can get a bit heavy. Now that you have this, you might be a bit confused. There's a bunch of things that appeared here. Your hair might look like a big blob. That might not be what you want. You have to, what is commonly called, groom the hair, which here, if you look at, okay, so usually it will rename the nodes to have the same name as your curve. So the My Cool Main Yeah Boy Curves shape in this case, which great name, I'm really proud of myself. It has a few options. By default, all of these are turned on, but what you can do is just turn off a few of these. Okay, if you go in edit driver and disable this driver for a sec, okay, you can turn off everything. You don't normally have to do this, just me for demonstrating what happens with this node. There is a little checkbox here called debug resampling, which will create a bunch of dots at each junction. So here you can see your hair is comprised of lines with joints, well, junctions, right? Uh, if you look at it now, you'll notice it looks a bit jagged, a bit square, and that might not be what you want. So, okay, one thing you can do is the obvious. Here, there's a checkbox called smoother curve. Okay, it helps. You can still see some jaggedness, but it helps. If I do this, you'll see a bit more what it does. It added a few points. Now, this is useful. Actually, if I disable this, it's going to be more obvious. So this is useful, but you might not want to keep it at that density because depending on your computer, this is the amount of points you have on the base curve. But once you create hair, it's going to copy this curve several hundred times, and that might start getting heavy. So the idea is that there's a bunch of things here to help you reduce the amount of joints here without losing the shape. So this is why this is useful, because it lets you visualize this concept. Okay, there's a few easy ones like adaptive resampling. That one does a good job at reducing the amount of point without losing the shape too much, but you can see it's not perfect. Now, adaptive resampling lookup is a weird concept. It's basically how far from a point does it look to judge if the hair is bending or not. So 5% mean 5% of the total length of the hair. So if you make it bigger, it's going to look further. And look for what? Okay, so it's going to try to understand if your hair has a curve going on. And the more a point contributes to making the curve shape, the more it's going to want to keep it. The flatter your hair is, the less it's going to want to keep points because it doesn't contribute to the curvature. So if it looks further, it's going to start thinking more of these are important because the point that's here is now looking at all over there, and it says, oh man, there's a big angle going on here, so it's going to try to keep more points. While if you shorten it, it's going to look at its neighbor and say, oh, well, that looks pretty flat, and then delete the point. So that's the idea. So by raising this, you keep more points, and try to raise it until you see that it keeps the shape without, you know, actually, if I turn it off, you see those points were not contributing at all, so they're not needed, so that's good. You've optimized your curve. So that's what it does. There are a few other methods that you can use here. If I disable this for a sec, resample by length will judge, okay, every 0.01 meter, so every centimeter, it will add a point every centimeter along the shape. And if you make it smaller, understandably, it will make more and more points. If you make it bigger, it will make less points until it's just, impossible to work with. So that's one way you can reduce the point count at virtually no cost. Then there's another method. If you want, you can do by count. This one is a bit finicky. Each curve, no matter their length, will have exactly 5 points. And that's not ideal because not all curves have the same length, so I prefer using by length. And then with the adaptive resampling, you see you got rid of a bunch of unneeded points. I mean, you can tell it's changing the shape a bit, but if it's negligible, you can live without it. So that's the idea. Now there are other settings here that you might want to use or not. There's trim. This one is there because I can. I don't know when anyone would use this, but it's there. Curl radius. Okay, that one, if you raise it, it's going to start looking weird because you need to change the curl amount. Okay, make it smaller. And you can see what this is doing. It's curling your hair. Now, this is a good example of an issue. So why does it look so ugly? It's because you don't have enough joints for it to be smooth. So if you make this smaller, for example, see, now it has more points to bend, still not ideal. Maybe disable this, and there you have it. You have a bunch of smooth curves. This is if you want the general shape to be like a curl. This is really useful. And of course, you can push this way further. You can make them really tight curls. Oops. And then really push it, and you can Naturally, and this is not something I can really help with. Um, if you want smoother curve, you need to add points, but if you add points, that gets heavier for your computer. So, for example, here I can demonstrate a bit, right? Now it's really smooth, but look at the amount of points you're generating. That's fine now, but when you have, you know, a few thousand of those, that's gonna get really bad. So be careful. Um, but yeah, by default, I don't need that many points, honestly. And for the example, I'm not gonna do this. So that's the idea here. All right. Also, yeah, again, see, it changed the shape a bit, but not enough that we should care. So next, what does this do? You don't have to worry about this for now. This is for rigging. So it is so very like me to forget to explain what this node does in the entire tree here. Set clump profile. This one is the only node that is unique to your custom hair. In this case, I'm not in the example anymore, so I'll do it on this hair. So if you go into geometry nodes, make sure you are in geometry nodes, that's very important. Select this modifier, and now you will see this red curve. This is what you need to modify if you want to change the shape of your clump for whatever you want. You know, for example, here, you can tell they have very different shapes, profile shapes. So this is what it does. And this is exactly the same as what will give the shape of this, right? So if you change it, you see. So yeah, this is how you change the you know, the clump shape as it is. And now we can come back to this guy. So I'm gonna re-enable this. Sorry, you need to turn on the rest too. So this banana, sorry, it looks like a banana, is your hair. Charming, I know. There's a few things you need to know about it. First of all, there's the clump size. So by changing this, you can see change the size of your hair. Now, right now I only have tree hair, so I'm gonna make it a big, so that, you know, there's no holes in the shape, right? Ideally, you would have more of those, or, you know, a better organization. This is just an example. Also, this is really ugly. Don't worry about it for now. There's more to this. Next, material. Do you want to give color, right? I have an example material in this file, hair. If you use it and then go in this, you see, there's color, right? But if you want to control your hair color with this setting in here, then you need to use pony hair. And now when I change the color, you'll see it follows, right? But yeah, that's up to you. I would strongly suggest creating your own material for your character, because there might be, you see here I have a gradient, there might be things you want to do yourself. So yeah, so that's one way to have hair. You might want to make better looking hair with this, but this is really just a like a preview mesh that I generate for animation purposes. Normally I would not use this for the final render. For the final render I would use something, and now if we go back to the fur menu, there is a preview main room, and now it disappears because normally you would have this turned on. Now it doesn't look convincing, right? And if I do this, you'll see what it does, right? It re-enables this second one. Actually, before I even go there, I'll just finish explaining what happens with the clump shape. Clump shape is, for example, if you want to create, I don't know, you create a plane, and then let's make like a sort of a star shape, sort of, right? If you do that, and then you select your hair and you select clump shape, see what it did? Now all your hair follows this shape. So if you change the shape, it's gonna try to follow that. So that's the idea. This is what clump shape means. Next up, so if we go back to what I was gonna get to, this part, and that's the part where I think it gets really cool. So you have, okay, let's apply a material. Let's put hair. Now it might look a bit sparse, so let's ramp the viewport child amount a bit higher. So you see, it starts looking more like hair, right? I will switch to geometry nodes to start explaining a concept here. Do you see this number? 144,000 points. This is what this original optimization meant here. If you reduce the number of points on the base curve, you reduce the points on all of these. And then this value goes lower. So my computer can handle it, but be mindful that's how that works. Also, you can see through it right now. That's because it's too thin, right? But I don't suggest ramping up the viewport child amount until it's beautiful, because that's going to be really slow while you edit. So, maybe put it like something sparse like this, and you might be tempted to say, oh, that's really ugly, I can't work with that. But trust me, you really don't need it while you work. For the viewport, though, I would suggest, something much higher. In my case, I'll go, I don't know, like 700. And see, it changed nothing. That's because once you render, it's going to kick in and you'll see it. You can enable radius effect amount. Here it did nothing, but what it means is, if, for example, I change the radius of this point, see what it does. It's going to try to add more hair to compensate for the fact that now it's the clump, because that's what it's called. The clump is larger, so instead of being larger with more empty space, it's going to try to fill with a bit more hair. That's not perfect. I would suggest creating more base curves instead, but that's one way. So yeah, this is pretty inoffensive. You can turn it on. Rigged curve is for advanced users. I would suggest not using it. It basically ignores everything that comes before it in case you have your curves on some other object. You can point to them and it's going to use those instead. Clump size works the same as what we had before. And now, okay, when I said don't worry about the sparse hair, it's because if I skip a few settings, here you see this thickness is what I judge is like the best realistic thickness that you can have. Naturally, in real life, it would be much smaller, but for the sake of optimization, this is pretty good. But while you're working on it, you can, multiply it by 10. And, it looks ugly, but at least now you can see your hair. So while you're working, that's going to be useful. Curl radius, you might be familiar with this now. I sincerely don't advise using this feature for now if you plan on animating your pony. If you don't plan on animating your pony, that's fine. But if you plan on it, try to not use this feature because, yeah, it doesn't quite work with animation yet, but for still shots, it will serve you well. Next, you have Frizz. That one is pretty self-explanatory. That feature is also present on the base curves. Actually, I can show you what it does. If you turn off Frizz here and you put it up here, you'll notice the entire clump is frizzing, and you can, do preserve length if you don't want the frizz to change the length of your curve. But you see it looks like it's crumpling on itself, right? Oh, you can change the distance of the frizz depending on things, right? It gets very messy real fast, so but if you wanted to frizz each individual hair one by one, then you want to use this one. But this one is also a bit finicky to work with animation, so I'll say use it and then test and see if it works for you. But yeah, this is very ugly, I agree. So there is Frizz Cumulative Offset, which honestly looks better, but is a bit less easy to use. So if we go a bit lighter, you see what it does. Just kind of like make your hair a bit more disheveled. So that's the idea of Frizz, and if I turn it off, it has a different effect. Clump Shape works exactly the same way, well, at least a similar way. It's not like exactly the same. Like, see, it's not perfect. It can create like little artifacts like this where you see it's like twisting. That's when you need to enter the beautiful world of orient vectors, which I will not explain here. For people that know, yeah, you know my pain. It's not fun out here. It's really, really bad. Like, you will struggle all you want and it's still gonna look weird. Like, one of these directions gonna work. So yeah, good luck with that. Next is edge density for clump shape. If you use a clump shape, the idea is it's placing your hair around that shape on the head, but it will tend to look as if like the hair is a bit sparse on the edge. This basically will fill more hair at the edge of the shape instead of inside if you want the shape to be a little more defined. That's the idea here. But generally, I would say try to avoid using this feature. It's not my best achievement. If you can make it work, all the more power to you. Honestly, I am using it for custom hair that I might reveal sometime soon. And I've made it work, but it's very painful to make it work, so good luck. Clump rescale is, yeah, it scales your clump in a XYZ direction. Yeah, same as the others, use it at your own risk. Strays, if you turn it on, it might not be obvious what it did. So if you change the stray distance, now you see it created a bunch of stray hair that kind of deviate. If I change the count, you'll see it creates hair, like loose hair that kind of deviate from the shape. If you change the shape, you'll see, yeah, that's what it does. Really useful to make your hair look less perfect. Speaking of making your hair look less perfect, length variance, and this one is very easy to show visually, usually. If I put it to 1, you see that everything's just converges to 1 point. And if I change it, it looks a bit more sparse at the tip. What it means is that each hair will have a different length. That's all it does. I leave it generally at 0.9. I think that's like a nice defined shape with some variations. So yeah, that's what that does. And the thickness, we've already talked about it, but there's also the tip thickness. This one will be self-explanatory. If you want the tip to look like you just cut the hair with a scissor, that's what you would do. But if it's the natural point of a hair, you would want to put it to 0. That's the concept here. Number of faces. That one is best explained if I zoom in. So right now you can see the hair is just 2 lines connected in a sort of unfinished triangle. If I put it like this, now you'll see all hair is a triangle tube. So yeah, a closed tube is technically more realistic and will behave slightly more realistically with the light, but I found out that at the default thickness, if you put it to 2, it barely affects the realism of the hair, and you generate 1 less face per segment per hair. It adds up, right? So if I have tubes, you can see I have 107,000 faces, and then I jump down to 71,000 faces. That's pretty good for rendering time. So for the sake of optimization, by default, I have this set to 2. And 1 will turn every hair into a single strip, like a flat strip, which in itself isn't bad. It's very light, very optimized, but it will also create a lot of sparseness, and I don't recommend it. I leave it because I can, but I would not suggest that. 2 at a minimum, I think, is the best thing. Now you have curve hair toggle. That one is for advanced user. If for whatever reason you need your hair to just stay a curve, you can just do that. All right, now that I've covered those settings, I will explain how to rig it. So to rig it, first of all, you need, like I said, a rig. Actually, let me go back to layout. Okay, so you need a rig that has the same name as your curve. Now, for the sake of example, if you want to animate your hair, you would want to have like a perfect rig that follows the shape of your curves, right? But in this case, I didn't do it because, yes, this is an example. So next thing, once you have those 2 things, you will select your hair and then rig custom hair. Wait a few seconds. And now if I re-enable the rig, you will see that the hair follows the head, and it did it all for you. Now be warned, what happened under the hood is that It did a bunch of steps to rig your hair, but to connect the armature, you know, the bone, to the hair shape, it used automatic weights. So if while testing you realize that your hair isn't moving like what you would want, uh, that part I can't help you more than explain that under the rig you have a hidden shape. If you reveal it and hide your hair, this shape is what is rigged. And you would need to go into weight paint, and then, okay, in my case I have one bone, so it's not really hard. But if for whatever reason you have more bones and the weight moves a certain part you don't like, you would have to go and paint the weights yourself. This again is maybe more advanced, but this is just to explain it for the sake of you know, of example. Next thing you might want to test, preview your main groom, and move your character, check if you like it. If for whatever reason you see your hair flickering weirdly while you animate, actually let me turn up the entirely thing. Let's see. Yeah, it works pretty well. But if for whatever reason your hair is doing weird stuff, I can't help you here. You have to deactivate and try to find another way, all right? Yeah, so this is how you rig your awesome hair. But now, one final addendum I want to bring here. Okay, see the root, do you see like this weird stuff going on here? That's not great. This is an artifact of how that hair is being created. To fix this, you need to select your hair. Make sure that you are not previewing the hair. Make sure it's like this, okay? Select your hair and click Convert Hair to Rig Geometry. Now, this button won't work. Don't worry, your hair isn't gone. It's just that it's hidden. Now, if I go back to this, you will see now that it actually follows. And also, that's what you have to do if you want to actually go and that's what I meant. We'll visit this later. Now you would have to, make it better yourself. Real sorry, but there's no good way around this for now. That's the best I could have done in such a short time. So yeah. Also, this hair doesn't include the curl options as of yet. Sorry about that. This was really just a preview of this method. So yeah, if you want to find your curves, you need to go under your armature that you've created, and you can hide the new one and show the old one again, which is up here, and make sure it's enabled in render. And yeah, so your curves are back, and when you're gonna click this, it works. So actually it's a bit dark because I have wireframe on, make sure it's off. And yeah, so this is how you make your own hair now. Now I want to talk about some failure points that are very common because of some misunderstood concepts or just lack of experience with Blender. No shame in that, everyone starts somewhere. When you want to create your hair, you should start with pressing Shift A and then type Bezier curve. And your first reflex, if you know a bit of Blender, would be to move the curve. This is not correct. This will break your hair. What you should do is press Tab, and now you see the handles, you are in edit mode. Now this takes a lot of space. You can press N, or you can just drag this menu. So this is how you would want to move your curve in edit mode. Why is that? Might get a bit complicated, but the short answer is that there is a difference between object space and local space. So this here is me editing in local space, which is what you want. Yeah, so you will create your hair, and this is how you should do it. Now, if for whatever reason you moved it in object mode and you do this, and then I don't know, you do that, but okay, beautiful, that's my hair. And now I just told you this is wrong. Well, it's easy. All you have to do is press Ctrl A. It's the Apply menu, apply all transform, and now This converts the object space into your local space. I know this might sound confusing. You don't have to worry about this. Now, like we said earlier, you just convert. There, you have your hair. Another thing I wanted to touch on, the geometry you see here is not as good as if you were to, let's say, make your own extruded curve. For people who know, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. Feel free to skip a bit. This is normal. This system that generates this geometry is intended for creating an easy and fast matching hair to match with this hair, because the goal of the custom hair system is to create these individual strands, not to create this. For lack of a better term, that was an afterthought. But at the same time, I understand some people want to prioritize creating geometry hair for whatever limitations they can't use the strand hair. So I understand, but the geometry generation is still a limited feature for the problems explained earlier. So if you intend to use the geometry to begin with, I would say use a mix of what I said earlier, convert to rig geometry, or look for tutorials on how to extrude a curve. You will have a much better time handling these methods. They will yield much better results. But for now, this is here for convenience, because it's not optimal to always show the full groom like this. Now, the next point I wanted to touch upon is with the rigging. If for whatever reason you decide to rig your hair and something goes wrong, let's say here now it's rigged. Okay, this is the bugs I said earlier. Let's look at the hair itself. Let's crank the numbers a bit for the sake of example. So if for whatever reason, okay, you see you don't like your deformation, this makes a lot of sense. Look at the base. Why is it moving around? You can guess. It's because your root is not close enough to the scalp. So that's a thing to be mindful for. And you can't just move it again afterwards because it's attached. So one easy fix would be to unbind. If you go in edit mode, select everything, push it down, and now you decide to bind your hair again. Unpredicted things might start happening. Here it's fine. Here it's fine. We got lucky. But understand that you didn't move this geometry, but you moved the rig. So be careful. Here we got away with it, but maybe that's not gonna be good for you. So keep in mind the rig and this geometry need to line up. So what you might have to do is to go back, unbind, select this geometry, go in edit mode, press A if you want to select everything, and then, you know, also move it down a bit, you know, and then press bind. But here's another issue. What we're trying to bind here is this curve. So if for some reason part of your curve is no longer inside this geometry, it might start not moving correctly, but here we got lucky again. So all right, that's cool. Let's say for whatever reason your geometry, you know, does this, right? Well, bind. Now, okay, okay, this is a bit extreme, but you get what's happening, right? So your curve was not inside the geometry, so it's not moving. This is very common at the tip or at the root. So the easy solution would be to literally just, you know, make sure that your geometry, this blob, is covering your curve so that it's inside the shape. And then you can go back on your hair, press, actually I didn't press unbind, but it's fine, press bind, and now look what it does, and it works again. So yeah, that's just a little bit of debugging I wanted to cover before closing off the video. So hopefully that covers most issues. It probably doesn't, if I'm realistic. Feel free to ask more questions. I know this is very intimidating for new users, but I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. Please understand. There's still some quirks, there's going to be some things that aren't quite there, but hopefully this set of fur tools will make your life a lot easier because you no longer have to do everything step by step like in the past. If for whatever reason you want to customize things or understand a bit more what these things are doing, feel free to rewatch the previous video on me making my pony from scratch. But otherwise, this is now the new workflow for making your own hair using this system. Again, this system is optional. You don't have to use it. If you want to create your own hair using a different method, like I said earlier, with geometry, or even with the default Blender hair system, you can completely do it. It's not going to break or anything. This is only for your convenience, because I found that it's easier for me to edit hair using Bezier curves, but then again, this is easier for long hairstyle. For shorter hairstyle, I would recommend using the default Blender hair groom system, which would require you to watch other tutorials, which Blender have released some of those, so hopefully this will be easy enough for you to figure out. So yeah, with that, I'll say thanks for watching, and hopefully this covered everything you need to know.
Can't you feel the